Hey guys, my name's Will and you're watching Boosted Autos. Today in this episode we're going to be reviewing this 2015 model WRX which I have behind me, and as you can see it is no normal WRX. This is the MRT Performance development vehicle. Now the reason I have this car is I actually work for MRT Performance full time as my day job, with Boosted Autos kind of just being my little side project that I do for fun. But I want to be really careful in this video not to blur the lines between the two. So if you're watching this, don't expect this to be a sales pitch for MRT Performance. I'm not going to be going into a lot of detail about that side of things. What I want to focus on in this video is the overall drivability of this car and the difference that the modifications have made. So I'll do my absolute best to make this as unbiased as I possibly can in this video, but do just be aware of that in the background as you're watching the video. Now, one of the complaints that people have had about WRXs over the generations in the last almost 25 years now is that every generation of the car gets a little bit more watered down, and it's sort of moved a little bit towards a family sedan rather than a pure sports car. So if you look back in time to the old 94 models through to 2000 with the GC8, that was a pure sort of sports car. It was the first really highly successful all-wheel drive turbocharged four-door vehicle, and you know, it had a reputation as being a pure sports car that was a real driver's car. Moving on from that, it's always sort of been a little bit more watered down with every generation, and we find ourselves now with the 2015 model being much more a car for the general masses. It's a car that's designed for people who want to have a family sedan that's practical but also want to be able to go fast as well. So what MRT Performance have aimed to do with this particular car and the kits that they've developed from this car is bring back that raw driving experience that you expect from a WRX. So the focus of this video is going to be determining whether that has been achieved or not with this car. So without further ado, let's get into the review. Alright, so we'll start off by having a quick look in the engine bay just so you can see exactly what's been done here. Now, you probably noticed straight away that it's running a stock airbox, and there's a good reason for that. The reason is that you don't actually need to put a cold air intake on these cars. There's plenty of flow. MRT actually did flow testing, proper flow testing on the stock intake, and found there was very, very little benefit to upgrading to a different intake. So you can see here you've got the ram on the front here, which sucks in the cold air and creates a ram or a pressure effect inside the filter housing here, and there's a drop-in uni-filter panel filter inside the box as well, and you can see there the pipe goes down to the inlet of the turbo. So the turbo on this engine and the FA20 DIT is actually down the bottom. So moving up to the back of the engine, you can see it's running a MRT vertical style cooler with a different housing there as well. And excuse the dirt in the channel there, I haven't had a chance to clean the car, but yeah, so that draws in lots of nice cool air from the bonnet scoop up here and draws it straight in. Now, the reason they're not running a front mount intercooler on this is simply because the aim here is for maximum torque and minimal lag. So we want to have the turbo spooling up as quickly as possible, and the best way to do that is to have a larger capacity top mount intercooler rather than a front mount, because that keeps the piping runs shorter and you get less pressure drop. So it's all about efficiency with this car. Now the other thing you'll see here is a flex fuel sensor, which is part of the MRT XC kit. Now this is really cool with the way this works in this car. Traditionally with flex fuel setups, you'll see a little ethanol content analyzer which you'll install somewhere on your dash. With this car you can actually just run that straight off the little inbuilt computer on the dash, and you'll see here that when the car's stationary, the acceleration or throttle position percentage becomes the ethanol content. Now it's reading 1% at the moment because I'm running 98 octane fuel in the car at the moment, but if we had E85 in there, you would see the content or the ethanol percentage content reading out here, and then as soon as you start moving the car again, it switches back to throttle position or acceleration percentage. Now you'll see here also the factory oil cooler sandwich plate as well, which is the same that I retrofitted to my BRZ back in the day, if you remember back to the start of the channel. So that uses the coolant loop to actually run through a bunch of channels to cool down the oil. That's a factory standard thing on these cars. You can see the nice MRT protection plate here for the serpentine belt as well, which is a nice little touch, and obviously the red charge pipe here as well. Now if you do want a very stock looking engine bay, of course you don't need to have these. This is just a nice little touch that MRT put on this car, but overall it's a very factory looking engine bay. You'll also notice here the factory strut tops as well. Currently running stock dampers in the car with white line lowering springs, and we'll touch on that a little bit later on in the video. So as I said before, the aim here is efficiency. There's nothing on the car that doesn't need to be there, and I really like that. I'm a fan of the nice clean engine bay look. So anyway, let's move on. So underneath the car you can see a bunch of white line goodies for handling. You'll also see the 3-inch turbo back exhaust running into the stock rear mufflers. Now we actually found there was no benefit at all from running an axle back exhaust on this car. The benefit comes from the axle forward. So you can see the nice 3-inch system underneath there. You'll also notice that no points are hanging down too low from factory as well. So a lot of aftermarket exhausts hang down really low from the car, and that can create issues with bottoming out, but the MRT exhaust sits up nice and high, which is great. And by keeping the stock rear mufflers in place, we minimize the amount of noise increase to keep the neighbors happy without compromising on performance. So that was a cold start, and as you can hear, it is a little bit farty and it is quite boomy inside the car, but the good news is once the cold start cycle is complete, after about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes or so, it does quiet right down and it sounds pretty much exactly the same as a stock car. So anyway, that's a quick overview of the mods that are on the car from an engine bay and underbody perspective. Next, we need to get into actually driving the car to see what it's like. Okay, so the first thing that you notice is just the monstrous amount of torque that there is pretty much everywhere in the rev range. Peak torque in this car is around the 2900 RPM mark, which is just insane. The thing that you have to remember is that this is an FA20 DIT, so it's only a 2-litre engine, and yet the amount of torque is just unbelievable. So the result is pretty much wherever you are in the rev range, it just takes off. It's just a monster, and it's comfortable to drive. It did take me a while to find a seating position and steering wheel position that actually was comfortable for me. I'm about 6 foot tall, and I found either I was sitting too high or I was sitting too far from the steering wheel. So it took me a good couple of days of driving the car to actually find a seating position that didn't make me feel like I was driving a Toyota Camry or something like that. But I did actually manage to adjust everything in a comfortable way that made me feel like it was more of a sports car eventually. And what I ended up doing was putting the seat back a little bit further to give me a little bit more legroom. I found that my knees were hitting the steering wheel all the time. The other thing that I noticed straight away with driving the car is that there's no drone at all in the exhaust, which is great. I was a little bit concerned that being a big 3-inch turbo back exhaust, even though it's running into the stock mufflers, I thought that it might be a little bit boomy and a little bit drony when you lift off the throttle and that kind of thing. But it's not drony at all, which is fantastic. The only disappointment is that it doesn't have that classic WRX sound, and I think that's just down to the fact that it's an FA20 and not an EJ engine. It just doesn't have that WRX kind of burble sound to it. Now, I don't know whether putting unequal length headers on the car would make a difference to that. I'm imagining it probably would. WRXs classically, you can hear them coming a mile away. You know, you'll be sitting at work and you go, oh, that's a WRX, and you know, it just doesn't have that kind of sound to it, which it bothers me. But that said, it is a nice sounding exhaust note, and I feel like the 3-inch turbo back exhaust into the stock mufflers is a really good compromise, because it's not obnoxiously loud, it's not overpowering, but it still sounds purposeful, and it still sounds like a performance car without being annoyingly loud. And I did actually have my wife sit in the back for a bit of a drive a couple of days ago, and just to see if it was boomy in the back, and she didn't have any complaints at all, which was great. So yeah, if you're worried about carting your family around, that kind of thing, it's not going to be a problem with this exhaust setup. Other than the cold start, which is quite noisy, it's really quiet. And I think noisy cold starts is just a thing these days. You know, for emissions control, they do all sorts of stuff with secondary air pumps and exhaust valves and stuff like that. And you know, every car now seems to sound horrible when you first start it. even my mother-in-law's Mazda CX-5 sounds like a tractor when you first start it up for the first minute or so. So it's just a thing you have to deal with these days, unfortunately. But yeah, the exhaust note in this is really nice. And in terms of other noises, it does make those kind of race car turbo noises as well. You do sort of hear, and I'll try and do it for you now quickly. So I don't know if you can hear that, but when you do put your foot down, you hear the turbo spool out. You kind of get that noise, which is really cool. Again, it's not obnoxiously loud, but it lets you know that it's there, which is great. So handling wise, the car is comfortable to drive just on the street normally. It's not wallowy, it feels quite planted, but you only feel the bumps that you want to feel, which is always important to me. It's not bucking all over the place on every single little bump. So I feel like the white line suspension package that we're running in this car at the moment with the stock dampers is a good setup. As I mentioned before, it's running stock dampers with white line lowering springs and also white line sway bars as well. So it feels well planted around the corners. There's not too much body roll. It's nice and stiff. The only complaint that I have driving around on the street handling wise is just that the steering feels a little bit disconnected. You know, when you do accelerate hard, suddenly the front wheels can start to sort of slip out a little bit from you from the torque. And so it just feels a little bit skatey in the front end. The other thing that I've noticed as well is, again, because of the monstrous amount of torque that it has, the car tends to sort of squat down when you do put the power in, and that makes the front wheels kind of light. So if you're powering out of a corner, it is very easy to get understeer and kind of, I guess, push understeer. So you can, so you put your foot down, the back of the car kind of squats down, the front end gets light, and then as you turn, the front wheels kind of skate along the road a little bit. So I haven't actually driven in the wet, but I can imagine that would be quite scary in the wet. But you know, that's just typical behavior for WRXs, and you know, being used to rear wheel drive now, it's something that's a little bit unfamiliar for me. It's not really problematic, it's just something that you kind of need to be aware of when you're driving. But I would like it if the steering felt a little bit more progressive and a little bit more connected to the road. Okay, so we're coming out of the main roads and traffic now and starting to get out onto the nice twisty back roads so we can stretch the car's legs and see what it can really do. But look, my overall impressions of driving the car as a daily commuter in traffic, it feels powerful, it feels capable. I really enjoy having all of that torque under my foot all the time. You know, it feels like a monstrously powerful car, which is awesome. At the start of the video, I said that I wanted to sort of see whether MRT had managed to sort of give back the WRX's animal instinct and raw kind of driving feel to it, and I definitely feel like that's been achieved in terms of how it feels just driving on the street normally. You know, you're constantly aware that you're driving a very, very fast and powerful car. You're constantly aware that you're driving a car that could seriously hurt you if you got it wrong. And I really like that about it. You know, it adds the drama back to driving this car. It doesn't feel like a normal sort of family sedan to drive around in town. You know, you're aware of what it is at all times, which I think is the important thing. So, but in saying that, it's still well refined, it's still comfortable, and it's still, you know, easy to drive as a daily driver, that you could easily cart your family around, you know, go away for holidays, no problem. So I definitely think that it's hit the nail on the head in terms of everyday drivability. So anyway, let's get out onto some twisty roads and see what it can really do. All right, so getting into some nice twisty bends now, and it definitely, the steering starts to reward you now. So it felt a little bit sloppy and disconnected just driving around in traffic, but it feels a lot more progressive when you're under load in a corner. So when you start to put some G-forces through the car, it really starts to feel nice and planted and solid, and you know, you can get into it. And actually, I feel a lot more confident powering through a tight corner than I did actually powering through corners just on the street. And that sounds a little bit funny, but once you start to put some weight on the outside corner of the car, it starts to bite in and it starts to reward you a bit more. So I'm instantly feeling more confident driving this car in a spirited kind of manner. And again, the car doesn't get unsettled over the bumps, which is really nice. It's definitely much more confidence inspiring here. So making sure that we have the right gear to power out of the corner. I'm getting kind of used to driving my BMW now, which is automatic with the ZF transmission. So that kind of, it rewards sloppy driving a little bit, but this thing, obviously you need to be in the right gear to power out of the corner. But using the engine braking to bring you down to speed and just feeling what the car's doing, it definitely feels beautiful. And the steering wheel is really nice as well, that D-shaped steering wheel. It's a nice small diameter, nice and thick and grippy as well, and just coming through these twisty corners, powering out. Yeah, it doesn't get unsettled, it's just really nice. Oh, that torque! Oh, it's so good. I can't believe that it's only a 2-litre engine. It's just mental. It's got so much more torque than my BRZ had, even though it's a similar amount of power output. I think it's just, obviously because the turbo is spooling up nice and low, it's not a linear power curve like it was with the BRZ, and it just absolutely hammers. It's so much fun to drive. I'm just going to enjoy this for a little bit, but yeah, all the things that I thought I might be disappointed about once I got onto a twisty road, I'm just not feeling. The car just comes alive, which is awesome. Oh, that grip. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I'm a bit of a rear-wheel drive fan these days. I drove WRXs, modified WRXs for 10 years before I switched into my BRZ, which is obviously rear-wheel drive, and then the BMW. But I can say there is something special about that front-end grip that you get when you power out of a corner in a powerful all-wheel drive car. It's you know, it's not as playful as a rear-wheel drive, but that sort of physics-defying grip feeling that you get when you power out of a corner in a car like this is just, it puts a smile on your face every single time, and I'm really enjoying driving this car. The turbo noises, the drama is back. It's what I love about this car, and you can see I'm getting excited, and you know, I'm grinning. I'm just really enjoying this experience. But oh, it feels like what driving a WRX should feel like. I gotta be careful to try to stick to the speed limit, but oh, I feel like I could take these corners twice as fast, and it'd be effortless. And I think that's the one dangerous thing about WRXs and all-wheel drive cars in general, is that you have to be going so fast to get in trouble. Like, I mean, you would have to be doing something monumentally stupid to crash this car. But because of that, you're tempted to push and push and push and push to the point where, you know, you are on the edge, and if something goes wrong, you're in a lot of trouble. Whereas a rear-wheel drive car is a little bit more forgiving in that sense. It gives you a bit more of a hint that you're starting to get a little bit close before it bites you in the ass. So this thing definitely commands respect. I feel like if I didn't respect this car, it would kill me very quickly. But oh man, I'm enjoying the hell out of driving this car. Yeah, this is what a WRX should feel like. It's awesome. When you open it up, you start to get those race car noises again. The exhaust gets a little bit louder when you put some boot into it. You've got the turbo whistle. You've got the bypass valve activating. You know, you feel like you're driving a proper sports car again. But yet, when you take it onto the street, it's so well refined and so comfortable and so understated. So they've really nailed the balance with this car. It's really impressive. The other thing to make mention of as well is that the braking performance in this car is fantastic. So we're running upgraded Brembo brakes on this, which is the same as what you'd find on the STI, as well as slotted DBA rotors as well. The brake feel is really precise. It's confidence inspiring there as well. And you can modulate your braking comfortably without the ABS kicking in. And yeah, it's a really well balanced package for this car. So definitely, if you're going to be running this kind of power in your WRX, I'd definitely look at upgrading your brakes to the Brembos off an STI, because it definitely does make a difference. One of the things that I noticed when I did test drive a standard 2015 WRX a couple of years back now, is that the brakes did feel a little bit inadequate for the car, even in its stock form when you get into it. Especially once you've been driving for a while and you start to get some heat into the brakes, they do fade quite quickly, and I'm not finding that with the Brembos. They bite really well. I'm not actually sure what pads this is running at the moment, but whatever they are, They do a really good job. All right, so I'm just gonna do a low speed second gear pull here just to see how we go. So put my foot down. Back off again. So I only accelerated up to the speed limit then, so it was only 80 kilometers an hour, but it just feels amazing. The torque there is just so impressive. The power stays on throughout the rev range, so it's not like you get a spike and then it just drops out. You really feel the surge of power right throughout the rev range. So it rewards you for revving the car out, which I think is something that's really enjoyable and something that's often missed on turbocharged cars these days. A lot of the time they're using small little turbos that you just can't rev them out because there's nothing to give in it over about 5,000 RPM. Once you get past that initial torque point, it just runs out of steam, and you may as well have changed gear already. But this car, you can hold it nice and flat and it just powers through, which is really enjoyable. Now we've got a bit more twisties here, so we'll just give it a little bit more power out of some of these bends, and you can really feel the sway bars at work here. It feels so well planted, it's not twitchy, and it doesn't understeer on turn-in, which is really impressive to me. Something that I noticed with my old WRX and with driving one of these stock as well is that there's a lot of turn-in understeer. It doesn't bite in, and it's not confidence inspiring as you turn in. So there's still a little bit of push understeer, which you would expect with a powerful all-wheel drive car, but there's no understeer on turn-in, which is really impressive for this car. And I guess that's the sway bars and suspension package at work. But it feels well planted, it feels connected to the road as you turn in, which is confidence inspiring. And that's exactly what I was worried about from the impression that I had driving on the street. I was concerned that it would feel sloppy and wallowy on a spirited drive, because it just didn't feel that well connected on the street. But as I said, as soon as you start to give it some, it really rewards you and it really starts to come alive. So one other thing that I think is important to cover as well is what the car is like to drive on the freeway, where you've got, you're going at a constant speed. So we'll just get up to speed and merge here. Getting up to speed and merging takes like half a second. I just went from 60 to 90 in like half a second, it felt like. So merging is no problem, we've established that, but I want to see what it's like to just sort of cruise along at highway speed, because I know one of the things that I loved about my old WRX was the fact that you could be sitting in 5th gear in that car because it was a 5-speed, 6th gear in this car because this is a 6-speed, and you're doing 110 on the freeway, you put your foot down and the car just goes. You don't have to worry about shifting down gears, so you can drive it like an automatic almost. So I want to see whether this kind of gives that same feeling. So 5th gear, we're only doing 90 at the moment, but you can just feel that power under, and I put my foot down, 100, 110, and it's just there. So one of the things I love about turbocharged cars is that feeling of boost sort of snowballing underneath your foot when you apply a little bit of throttle at speed. And I can feel it now. I'm doing 110, sitting behind some other cars in traffic. I put my foot down a little bit, and you can just feel that boost sitting there ready to explode out when you put your foot down. So we'll try to get an opportunity to show you in a second. There's a bit of heavy traffic on the freeway today, so I have to back off a little bit again, but we'll pull across now, and I've got the boost snowballing underneath me. Oh, it just goes. It's so good. I mean, what does that say to you? I mean, I'm having fun driving this car on the freeway. Like, it's a dramatic and an enjoyable experience just sitting on a freeway doing nothing. So, that really tells you what it's like to drive this car, I think. Like, this is the kind of smile I used to get when I drove my old GC8 WRX, and I never really had that with the 2006 model. Even though it was a fast car, it was just a boring car to drive. But this car's got the flare back, and I love that. As soon as I started driving this in a more spirited fashion and doing what it's designed to do, it's just so much fun. I love this car. I don't want to give it back now. Sorry, Brett, you can't have your car back, it's mine now. All right, so I'm now sitting in the typical Sydney bumper-to-bumper traffic, which I will be stuck in for the next 40 minutes now as I drive to work. But you know what? We're running the stock clutch in this car, and I can drive this car just like it was a stock WRX. It's not a problem at all. My foot's not going to get sore. I'm not going to get a sore leg. I'm not having to deal with a big, obnoxious, heavy clutch. The exhaust isn't too loud, it's not boomy. You know what, it's just like driving a nice stock car. It's comfortable, no problem at all. So, you know, like just every scenario that we've been through with this car in this video, it just, you know, it ticks the box. Sure, it's a little bit boring to drive around on the street because the steering feels kind of electronic, but you know, really that is the only thing that I don't like about this car. The steering, when you're driving around on the street, just feels disconnected. You don't feel like you're at one with the car, but as soon as you start hitting those corners fast and start loading up the car, that problem goes away, and you feel confident. You feel the pressure of the car turning in, and you know that race car feel, that real raw driving experience comes back to it. So I said at the start of this video that my objective here was to suss out whether MRT had managed to bring back that classic WRX feeling with this car. And look, to be honest with you, I've been driving the car for a week now. Driving around in traffic to begin with, because it's a bigger car and because of that electronic feeling steering, I didn't feel like that had been achieved. But the second that I opened this car up on the back roads, and as soon as I started driving it on the freeway at speed and really stretching its legs and exploring what the car can do, it reversed my decision. I fell in love with the car straight away, and you could see from the smile on my face as I was hitting those corners that, you know, it just rewards spirited driving. It really rewards you when you start to explore its boundaries and extract the performance out of the car. And I'm sure that it's capable of so much more. And if you've seen the videos of Luffy driving this car around Eastern Crete, you can see what the car can do. And I'm not coming anywhere close to that with my driving because I'm not that good a driver and I'm driving on public roads. But I think that they've nailed it. To be honest with you, they've nailed it with this car. It's well refined, it's not too loud, it's comfortable to drive in traffic, but as soon as you start exploring its boundaries, it rewards you. And I think that's what's been missing with the newer generation WRXs. I think it's there for me in this car, and that surprises me because, to be honest with you, I didn't think that it was possible to tick all of those boxes without making some serious compromises. In answer to the question, yes, I honestly do believe that this feels like a true WRX to drive. So look, if you're interested to learn more about the power kits that MRT offers, hit up the MRT Performance website, www.mrtperformance.com.au. Hopefully you found this video interesting. I've had a lot of fun making it. It's not the sort of video that I normally do, but I'm hoping that I'll get more opportunities to drive cars like this and share the experience with you guys. So make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget about our 10,000 subscriber giveaway as well, which you can go into the running to win a really awesome prize pack simply for subscribing to the channel, liking us on Facebook, and following us on Instagram. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments below, especially if you own a WRX, particularly the 2015 Plus model. How do my impressions of this car compared with your impressions of your own car? What modifications have you done? Have you felt like you've got the value for the money out of it? And yeah, what's your overall experience owning and driving your car? So love to hear from you in the comments below. Also, if you think that I've missed anything that I should go back and cover, let me know and I can sort that out for you too. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.